Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal, where identity is never as stable as it seems. Tonight, a curious man, a fractured story, and a case built on contradiction. Max Carrados listens to what a man claims to be, and hears the truth slipping through the gaps. I knew you in a moment, Mr. Carrados, but I expect that you haven't the very faintest idea of who I am? No, admitted Max Carrados pleasantly. I am afraid that I must plead guilty. But, he added, in his usual matter-of-fact, effective way, of course I know well enough who you were. 20 years ago, at least 20 to my account, we acted charades together, and you were Gertie Hamilton. I still am, admitted the lady, with a suggestion of resignation in her voice. And it's every bit of 20 years as far as I'm concerned. That evening, Mr. Carrados, duly announced by an occasional small bill in the windows of dairies, fancy wool shops, and other refined establishments, had been delivering an address on premonition, hallucination, and autosuggestion at the Corn Market Hall in Overbury. It had amused the blind man to accept the invitation to give the annual stall-worthy lecture, as it frequently did amuse him to do unexpected things, sheerly to experience. But more than once before he was through the unentertaining business, he cursed the moment of good-natured assent. The last formal word of compliment was spoken, and the audience dribbled away with a sense of having performed a duty only slightly less meritorious than that of going to church. Parkinson, at all events, in the glory of being seated on the platform, had thoroughly enjoyed himself. It was then that the lady, who had occupied a retired seat well down the hall, summoned up the resolution to approach the lecturer and to challenge his recollection. "And you really do know me by my voice. How wonderful! I had been told, but you never know what to believe. It does depend somewhat on the teller, doesn't it?" agreed Carrados. "Well, it was chiefly Lydia Murgatroyd, I think. You remember her? Lydia married a drawing master who had a pupil whose father, a wholesale druggist, got into a case and employed a Mr. Carlyle who said, 'Heavens,' interposed Carrados, 'that's 5 removes already.' You can only believe a fifth of what you heard. Much better expect to find me as you found me in the past." "Well, we were always quite good friends, weren't we? You were Mr. Max Wynne in those days, and I had to trust my poor misleading eyes then? Yes. I wonder if I should have known you, Miss Hamilton, at sight." "Oh, I hope not," she exclaimed ingenuously, and disclosing that train of thought, she added, "But my sister Mildred was the pretty one, you know." "Mildred. Yes, I remember her very well indeed," replied the blind man thoughtfully. "We were all her devoted slaves." "And she died? You heard?" "Not until now. Your voice told me that." Miss Hamilton's look expressed surprise, but she accepted what he said unquestioningly. It agreed with much that she had heard. "Yes, she died 5 years ago. And, curiously enough, it has to do with that in a way that I am here now. She suddenly found her diffidence returning. I came to see if the Mr. Carrados I'd heard so much about really was the Max Wynne we used to know, and if so, to ask your advice." At the back of the hall, a sad man was already putting out the lights. In the neighborhood of the platform, another coughed hopefully from time to time. No one else remained, even the young lady who had played selections from Bach and Schumann before the lecture and, God Save the King, after it had closed the hired piano, rolled up her music and stolen silently away. At a suitable distance apart, exercising his unique gift of being profoundly impressed by a subject that he had no interest in whatever, Parkinson was deeply immersed in a chart illustrating a century of wheat averages of the British Isles. "I suppose that I oughtn't to detain you here," continued Miss Hamilton, looking about. "I wonder if you could spare the time to go back with me and tell me what you think. I live just outside Overbury. Quite a short walk. If you knew anything of life in the Mitre smoking room, you wouldn't sound so diffident about offering an alternative for an hour or two," replied Carrados. "That's just like you used to be," she commented, "thanking me for asking you to do something." As they walked through the silent and deserted streets of the little market town, Carrados was reviewing his memories of the past. 25 years ago, he had given the lady the benefit of 5. He had been of very small account indeed, an unknown youth in a strange city, with the wealth that had afterwards suddenly descended on him as remote then as if it had been buried in the mountains of the moon. The Hamiltons had let him understand that he need not be solitary if he cared to accept the simple, kindly entertainment they dispensed. It had not lasted very long. Promotion to another town had cut across his path, and the Hamiltons had never become more than an incident. But, a little tardily perhaps, he recognized that at the time their friendliness had meant much to him. The now middle-aged Gertrude, padding rather heavily by his side as she guided his course, had been the elder of the sisters. The other, Mildred, had more than merited Gertie's claim in his own prosaic tribute. Her memory stirred no heartbeat now, but he could very well recall the shy wonder with which the adoring youth had watched her movements. Then there had been a brother of whom he was yet to hear. Both parents would be dead. "Here we are at last," exclaimed Miss Hamilton with determined sprightliness, and Carrados heard the latch of a gate lifted. The garden they passed through was of the cottage order, but trimly kept. The blind man checked off one old English flower after another, and divined the care lavished on them before the door was reached. "I wonder if Mr. Parkinson would mind sitting in the kitchen with my old servant," whispered Miss Hamilton. "I am rather afraid of him, do you know?" The little grimace accompanying this indicated that the idea was to be regarded humorously, and Carrados understood that what she really doubted was the extent of Parkinson's discretion. "Nothing would suit him better," he replied. "If he happens to approve of my address, he will give your servant a selection of extracts from it, only in much superior language. Then I will take him through, if you will excuse me." She lingered at the door and laughed a little self-consciously. "And generally, though of course you wouldn't remember a thing like that. We used to have just coffee and cakes as a sort of supper. But I hardly expect that now. Do you still make the cake with pink icing and the orange flavor?" he inquired. "Well, really, I wouldn't have believed," she exclaimed, and bounced away like a delighted schoolgirl. A little later, having successfully introduced Parkinson and arranged for the appearance of the celebrated cake, Miss Hamilton launched upon the subject of her trouble. "It's really about Cyril. I meant when I said Mildred. 5, she explained. "Cyril is Mildred's son, the only child she had, and so of course my nephew, the only one I have. Then Tom. Tom went to South Africa 10, 12, 15 years ago. We never heard from him after the war there. I think he must have been killed. You see, Mr. Carrados, I'm quite alone except for Cyril now. Father, mother, Tom, Mildred. All I had. All gone. Your nephew lives with you here?" prompted Carrados. He was sorry for the poor lady, forlorn and rather unwieldy among the buffetry of circumstance, but he began to foresee that it might be necessary to keep her to the point. "No, I'm coming to that. You must forgive me. I know I'm slow and tiresome. I can do nothing but think about things now, hour after hour. Moping, I suppose others would call it. It's so dreadful if it's true that I can hardly believe it possible. And yet, there it is. I must do something about it." "Yes," said Carrados, smiling away the edge of his retort, "you must really tell me about it." "There I go again," confessed Miss Hamilton with a gesture of despair. "How can I expect you to advise me?" "Well, Millie married a Mr. Bycourt, Mark Bycourt, who still lives a few miles from here. He was quite a nice sort of man, but a little old for her, I thought, considering her looks and chances, and he really doesn't appear to be interested in any subject except water beetles. It seems a strange taste for a man. He might have taken up golf, or prize poultry, or politics, or lots of things. I mean, that would have seemed more, well, gentlemanly." "Quite a number of people are interested in water beetles," observed Carrados mildly. "So I am given to understand," she admitted, "and I suppose that I must be narrow-minded. But don't think that I have anything against Mr. Bycourt. He made what I should call a good husband, though it must undoubtedly have been a little dull for Millie at times. When they had been married about 3 years, Cyril came. Did you ever hear of an Uncle Stace when you knew us at Midchester, Mr. Carrados?" "Stace? No, I have never heard the name before," replied the blind man. "I don't quite know where the relationship came in, or if he really was any relation at all. I have heard that he had been very fond of Mother years ago and wanted to marry her, but when we children knew him he seemed quite old and was said to be very rich. Well, all that he has to do with it is this. Millie was his favorite, as she was everyone's. And when he died, it was found that he had left everything, almost everything, to her and to Cyril afterwards. To her and to her children generally afterwards? Suggested Carrados. No, just to Cyril by name. There were no other children, you see. Quite so, agreed the listener. Millie died when she had been married about 8 years. It was appendicitis. Then Mark asked me if I would keep house for him and look after Cyril, and I did, for 4 years. Of course I got very fond of the child, especially after I had mothered him through his little troubles and illnesses. He was all that was left to me of the old days at Midchester. It was a great blow to me when Mark married again. Carrados contributed only a sympathetic nod. Miss Hamilton seemed fairly well set on her subject now. I should not have minded so much if the new Mrs. Bycourt had been what I would call a suitable person, but really, one could hardly describe her as a lady. She was the very opposite of Mildred, and what Mark could have been thinking of, I cannot imagine. Some people are like that, admitted Carrados diplomatically. Well, I suppose so, but it is a great pity. She was the widow of a sort of small country gentleman who owned 1 or 2 racehorses and came to grief, and she really seemed to have absorbed the atmosphere of the stable and the farmyard. Not that I mean there was anything definitely wrong about her, but the whiskeys and sodas, the cigars, the slang, to call it nothing worse, the slapdash of everything. And Mark was such a refined man, whatever else he was. I really couldn't stand it for more than a week, although they both pressed me to remain until I could make my own arrangements. It was a sudden marriage, you know. That was about a year ago. It really was very terrible for me, Mr. Carrados, to have to give little Cyril up. He was such an affectionate, dear little boy, and for 4 years I had been neither more nor less than his mother. But there! I took this cottage partly so that I could get across to Stack's, that's their house, from time to time, and of course I have to consider ways and means as well. Papa was unfortunate towards the last. In the meanwhile, Cyril goes daily to a small school kept by a lady in the village. He is delicate and rather too young to leave home yet. Mrs. Bycourt has 2 boys of her own, a few years older than Cyril, and perfect young ruffians. Fortunately, they are generally away at boarding school. And now, prompted Carrados, for Miss Hamilton's silence was becoming rather strained, and after maintaining an admirable control up to this point, the poor lady, brought face to face with her immediate distress, suddenly brimmed over. "Oh, Mr. Carrados," she wailed appealingly, "don't laugh at me, but I'm sure the woman's murdering Cyril by degrees so that her own will get his money. I know she is, and what am I to do?" Now, with regard to murder, experience had imbued the blind man with 2 convictions. The first, that it is a very easy thing to do, and the second, that it is a very difficult thing to do properly. If this inauspicious Mrs. Bycourt actually succeeded in removing her young stepson, Max Carrados did not doubt that the chances were on the side of justice overtaking her, but the more pressing need was to find out if she had any such intention, and if so, to frustrate it. "Would the money go to her if your nephew died?" he asked. "Oh yes, I saw our old solicitor about that. As I said, it was left to Millie and to Cyril after her. It is really Cyril's now, but held in trust for him until he comes of age. Of course he can't make a will yet, so that if he died the money would pass to his father, and he naturally would leave it to his wife." "He probably would," agreed Carrados. "How much is there?" "It was about £30,000. I understand that by the time Cyril could touch it, there would be more than 50,000. That seems a lot to people like ourselves. Mark is quite comfortably off, I suppose, but by no means wealthy, and his new wife will have brought him little. If she is determined to get rich or to provide well for her own awful children, Cyril's fortune." It was quite clear that Miss Hamilton had definitely settled the offending Mrs. Bycourt and Cyril in their respective roles of murderess and victim. But when the patient investigator brought her up against the test of concrete facts, he felt that the most useful purpose he could serve would be to discount her fears. But I feel so absolutely convinced that something sinister is going on, pleaded the distressed lady. Oh, Mr. Carrados, the boy is growing thinner and more lifeless week by week. The woman is capable of any villainy. The inducement is plain before our faces. Then why not persuade the father to get a doctor in? The doctor has seen him already. I insisted on Dr. Huntley being called in some time ago. Carrados passed the revealing word, insisted. And he said? He inquired. Oh, he said that there was nothing really the matter. Of course he meant that Cyril hadn't measles or chicken pox, and we knew that well enough already. He recommended a little change. Cyril went with me to Eastbourne for 2 weeks. There he improved wonderfully. Then we came back and he went down again. Could he not live with you here for some time? I should love it. But Mrs. Bycourt won't hear of such a thing, naturally. She says that the boy has been coddled enough already, me, of course, and that the sooner he gets over his morbid fancies the better, and that in any case, if the air of Stax doesn't suit him, it's hardly likely that this will, as it's only 5 miles away. Now whatever can that be at this hour? Did you hear a knock? I didn't, but Susan has gone to the door. I heard a footstep outside and then a knock, replied the blind man. It is a child who is uncertain. Please, Mim, said the elderly servant, opening the room door and standing there a little fluttered. Here's Master Cyril from Stax and in a pretty pickle. Do you mean he's alone? Exclaimed Miss Hamilton, jumping up and making for the door. Oh, my poor lamb. For the next half-minute there was alternate rattle and murmur in the hall, while the staid Susan continued by the door, regarding Mr. Carrados with a fascinated interest. Parkinson had undoubtedly been enlarging. Then Miss Hamilton returned, leading in a little boy who clung to her, his pale, over-refined young face not yet wholly reassured. This is Cyril, Mr. Carrados, she explained, patting the hand that gripped her protectively. He tells me that he has run away from home and walked all the way here, but I know nothing more because I thought that you had better hear it with me. Well, he seems to have come just in time for some coffee and cake, unless the signs deceive me, remarked Carrados with encouraging levity. Fond of cake with plenty of pink icing on it, Cyril? Yes, thank you, sir, replied the boy politely, as he took serious stock of this new grown-up. So am I, confessed the friendly stranger. And I don't mind telling you, Cyril, that when I was 10, that's older than you perhaps, I ran away, because there was a very fat big boy who used to wait for me every morning and punch my head. I am 10, protested Cyril, and I am not much afraid of boys. But I am frightened of the man who comes to me in the night and is going to take me in his cart. A look of pitiable terror came into his eyes, and his voice rose almost to a scream. Don't let him. Oh, don't let him take me, Auntie. With a croon of horror and affection, Gertrude Hamilton flung her arms protectingly about her darling child and shot a meaning look of triumph at her unbelieving guest. Now what do you think? It seemed to say, and for all the world as if he had meant it, the blind man's scarcely moving hand mutely signaled back, quietly. Be careful now. He shall not touch you, he said reassuringly. You are going to stay here tonight. Now tell us what this man is like, so that we shall be able to prevent him from ever coming again. He is a big man, and very strong, so that he can carry people. He stands by my bed, looking down, and there is a nasty smell comes with him. What does he wear? It is a long brown thing with a belt, and a queer high hat, not like men wear now, and he has a staff. Can you tell us what his face is like? Have you ever seen another that reminds you of it? It is only his eyes that you can see, replied Cyril, in a voice low with the memory of his terror. There is something like a cloth over his face. Oh, my precious, was wrung from Miss Hamilton, but Carrados's insistent gesture cut short her passionate outcry. It is a dream, said the blind man quietly, taking up his patient again. A bad black dream. You are really asleep at the time, Cyril? I am not quite awake, admitted the boy consideringly, but I am not really asleep. It is very queer and different. And he mutters, Do you remember anything that he has ever said? Only a little bit now and then. Last night he said he has I forget the word. Oh yes, the tokens on him, but he is not dead yet. I will come again tomorrow night. That was why I dare not stay any longer. Miss Hamilton left Cyril on the couch where they had been seated and crossed the room. Is it necessary to distress him any more with this? She whispered. Her face was white and scared, but there was the ring of defiance in her voice. Whatever happens, he shall not go back while I'm alive. It's extraordinarily fascinating, replied Carrados in the same guarded tone, and we ought to get at the bottom of these things. On the face of it, this is plainly nightmare. He has read it all. Do you ever, he continued, turning to the boy again, do you ever hear a bell ringing while this goes on? Yes, was the reply, given without hesitation. It rings sometimes outside. That is before the man comes in or alter he is gone. You see, explained Carrados aside, that bears it out. If this were someone got up to terrify the boy, it's absurd that he should take the extra risk of having a bell rung outside, merely for a point of extra realism, but it is just the sort of detail that sticks in the imagination and reproduces in a very vivid nightmare. But what is it? Demanded Miss Hamilton, beginning to be shaken in her high attitude. What is it that he is supposed to dream about? What? Why, the plague, to be sure. The great plague that furnished nightmares for many a generation in the past. Let me see, Cyril. You are fond of reading, aren't you? Well, yes, sir, said Cyril. If it's tales, he added conscientiously. Oh, of course. We don't mean lessons, do we? Have you ever read Robinson Crusoe? Rather. I've got it at home, with pictures. Man Friday and the Parrot and all. Do you remember who wrote it? Yes, Daniel Defoe. Bravo. Well, he wrote other books. Can you tell me any? Apparently not. Cyril considered, but remained dumb. Something about a journal and a year, eh? Prompted the questioner. No? Well, never mind. But why not ask him outright if you think it's that? A parent, put in the lady. Shall I? It is liable to suggest, was his reply. But try. Once upon a time, a lot of people got very ill, said Miss Hamilton coaxingly, and they called it a plague. Have you ever heard of it, my pet? Yes, Auntie, said Cyril, his large, considering eyes incapable of jest. It's what Papa calls me when I ask him things. Miss Hamilton, so to speak, stood down, and Carrados resumed. Did you ever see a picture of a man in a long brown dress? Like him? Interrupted the child with a shudder. No. And please, sir, my dear lad, anticipated Carrados, going to the couch and laying his hand unfailingly on the boy's shoulder, we are going to help you. We intend that you shall never see the man again. But sometimes the doctor has to give you nasty medicine for your good. It isn't always pleasant to be left in the dark, even when you are 10, is it? No, sir. Well, when you feel like that, Cyril, you can think of me being in the darkness with you too. I am always in the dark, because, you see, I am blind. Oh, I didn't know, sir, said the little boy with quick feeling. I am very sorry, but, consolingly, you look all right. Thank you, replied Mr. Carrados gravely. Generally speaking, I feel all right. But we all have our moments in the dark. Cyril has a little light always in his bedroom, volunteered Miss Hamilton. Don't you, dear? Quite right, said Carrados idly. A night light? Yes, but electric light, you know. A tiny bulb. It's new there. Mrs. Bycourt said she couldn't stand lamps, and so Mark has recently put up an installation for the house. Electric light and recent? Mused Carrados. How long ago? About, well, how long have you had the electric light, Cyril? A few months, isn't it? At Christmas, Auntie. We had all the lights on at once on Christmas Day. Don't you remember? You were there? Miss Hamilton nodded assent, her eyes on her guest's impenetrable face. "Yes, that is right," she said. "Let me see." A most disarming unconcern had come into the blind man's voice. Was it before or after Christmas that the bad dream first came? "It was just after Christmas," replied the boy. "Quite sure?" "A little more insistent now." "Oh yes, I remember by my presence." And then he began to come oftener, and then he stayed away a bit, and I am frightened, but I'm glad I told you, my treasure," cried the fond lady. "Why didn't you tell Auntie sooner?" And for reply, Cyril hung his head and whispered the fatal insuperable excuse of childhood. "I didn't like to." "Another time you must," she enjoined. "And do you always sleep on your right side, as I told you?" "Yes, Auntie." "And the bed is still pushed to the farther wall, away from the draught where I arranged it?" "Oh yes, Auntie. It is right up to the little pull thing in the wall that does my light. I can send it in and out while I'm in bed." "And the best place for you to be now, young man," said Carrados, taking out his watch and touching its fingers. 11:15. "Yes, indeed," chimed in Miss Hamilton. "If you don't want another piece of cake, Susan will take you up. I suppose," turning to her visitor, "that I ought to let them know somehow at Stack's where Cyril is tonight? I have been thinking of that. Are they on the telephone?" "No." "What a pity. You would have told them from your hotel, I'm sure." "Yes, but as they're not, so much the better. Just write them a line, and I will take it round there now." "You, Mr. Carrados, at this hour? Why not? All hours are alike to me." "Then we needn't disturb them if they know nothing of the escapade as yet. If I find the place in darkness, I shall leave the note to be discovered with Master Cyril's absence in the morning. I have a fancy to see Stack's in my own particular way, Miss Hamilton, and lo and behold, the fates arrange it." Less than half an hour later, a motor car skated down the long, slight hill that ended in the village street of Erling and drew up before the cottages began. Mr. Carrados and Parkinson got out, and leaving the hotel chauffeur to doze across his wheel, they set out on the adventure of discovery. The turning to the left before the baker's shop directed the leader of the expedition. "That must be it ahead, Parkinson, although the rural baker does not seem to bake by night. Edwards should be the name." "There is a shop, sir," assented Parkinson, peering across the way, "but I am unable to distinguish the name. If I may." He was away a moment. "Perfectly correct, sir, and there is the lane. The people hereabouts, sir, would seem to dispense with street illumination, and it is very dark tonight." "True," replied Carrados, "and fortunately there is no moon." "Yes, sir," agreed the faithful servitor, catching his toe against the curb and recovering by his master's guidance. "I appreciate that it gives us the initial advantage." A short half-mile, another turn, and presently a darker mass emerged, lying back upon their left. "That should be Stack's," conjectured Carrados, when Parkinson gave him this information. "Now is the murder out yet?" "We are coming to the gates," reported the proxy. "Eyes. There is a small lodge immediately inside. The gates, of open-work iron, are closed. The drive." "Wait," interrupted Carrados. "Any lights showing at the lodge?" "No, sir." "Not on this side." "Have a look farther on." Parkinson walked 50 yards along the road and then returned. "No lights anywhere," he reported. "Then the murder is probably not yet out." With so good an excuse for being on the premises, and every opportunity for losing ourselves if need be, I begin to despise the front way, Parkinson. Let us investigate. They continued along the road away from Stack's. Parkinson soon reported a small door in the garden fence, but this proved to be locked. A little farther on, a lane gave promise on their left. A few stars had risen, and the seeing eyes were more accustomed to the darkness. After a single futile cast, a path was discovered through the fields that now separated them from Stack's, and with scarcely the tribute of a scratch, they forced a likely hedge and fell through into what was unmistakably a private garden. "Never mind the rhubarb plants," said Carrados. His follower was standing rather aghast at the extent of their devastation. "They made capital landing and usefully indicate that we are in an obscure part of the kitchen garden." "Can you see the house?" "Well, we will take a stroll around." Progress was slow and vicissitudinous. "The advantage of beginning operations from here is obvious," expounded the specialist. "If we walk across a bed of onions, as we are, in fact, doing at this moment, we create an aromatic fixed point, so to speak, to which it is easy to return again whenever it becomes prudent. It is a line that holds. I have always understood that onions possessed certain medicinal properties, sir," replied Parkinson sagaciously, "and heaven knows what profundities the ingenious creature might not have advanced, had not a parallelogram of emerging blackness disclosed the position of the house." Here also, ran the report, no lights were visible. "Then the murder is certainly not Hout," decided Carrados. "We can resume our leisurely survey, but not, for preference, along their celery trench." "Parkinson, I am very sorry, sir. For the moment my attention was distracted. I have just observed another building, much nearer than the house, where a light is showing." "Make for it, then. A light means someone, and we must put ourselves right by getting in the first word." But he was wrong. The place, a small, well-built shed standing in a remote corner of the grounds, half shrubbery, half waste, they judged, was deserted. Machinery, now idle, proclaimed its use, the light that had attracted them a single indicator lamp glowing above a switchboard. "The dynamo house, of course, and now they're on the battery," explained Carrados when they had investigated. "I heard that they made their own light, but who would have expected to find the place down here?" "I had some general conversation with the elderly person at Miss Hamilton's," volunteered Parkinson tolerantly, "and after the arrival of the young gentleman, she expressed her opinions about the family living here." "Mr. Bycourt is a very nervous, irritable gentleman, it would appear, sir, and cannot put up with any noise or distraction." "Perhaps on that account—" "Aye, that will be it," agreed Mr. Carrados. "The beat of the engine will scarcely be heard up there. But SSH, what the deuce is coming now?" Someone was approaching at all events, and the two intruders shrank back into the readiest cover. "A woman, sir," whispered Parkinson. "An old woman," amplified his master. "She carries something, and she's in a hurry. Also, she has no business here, which gives us a great advantage, because we have." At the threshold of the little house, the burden was shot down. The watchers knew already that the door was fastened and looked for the unknown to produce a key. Instead, there was a sudden scrunch of iron, a splintering of wood, and the door swung loosely open. "Forced, egad!" thought Carrados. "Our lady is determined." Then, as she passed in, dragging along what now appeared to be a sack, he touched his attendant's arm, and together they crept forward to the half-open door. "It's shavings and wood she's brought," conveyed Parkinson, his eye to a convenient chink. "And, blow me, sir," he added a second later, stirred to this deplorable lapse Iram his usual diction, "but she's drenching the place with petrol. She means mischief." "Stop!" cried Carrados, disclosing himself in the doorway. "Haven't you the sense to know that you'll blow yourself up too?" The startled creature, never was there a meeker-looking petroluse than this tidy, gray-haired cottager, dropped the box of matches she was handling and literally fell upon her knees among the mess she had contrived. "Oh, the dear Lord preserve us all," she gasped in terror. "Who are ye?" "Never mind that. The question is, who are you, and what are you doing here?" "Sure, I'm only Mrs. Laffey from the lodge just by, sir. Indeed, I wasn't doing no harm at all. But you gave me a great turn. Just a bit of arranging and tidying up, as you may say." I dropped a spot of oil, and Parkinson threw out Carrados in a sufficient whisper, "The police." "Oh, don't bring in the police on me, kind gentleman," implored Mrs. Laffey, with redoubled fluency. "The dirty, thievin' sergeant that set the lie against me a short while back over Mr. Johnson's strayin' pullets, it's little justice I should ever see. Be the good kind gentleman. You have just one chance." Carrados took out his watch and displayed it upon his outstretched hand. Get up and tell us the exact truth, no matter what it is. Come, out with it." "Indeed, Anne, I will, Sir Anne, your honour, for I'm sure ye'd not be, after betraying a poor old widder woman. 'Tis for me, boy, I'm doing of it, and that's the blessed truth this minute, though nothing but black words and the lift of a hand maybe would be me thanks if he did know. Your boy? Your son, you mean? Me boy Jim, and he the only one I've got, and me husband gone this 17 years. Ever since he has left school, he's worked in the garden, with a thing here and there maybe in the house beyond, and a bit extry for it of a Saturday. Well, and it's the stark truth. I'm telling ye, the blessed knows." Last back end, the master calls him by and said, "Jim," he said, "the missus is determined on this electry light, and it's all arranged for. You'll have to learn to handle the dynamy and what not, but 'tis no matter at all. An hour here and there maybe, and a grand learning for you to be an engineer. Jim," I said when I hear of it, "don't do it. For 'twas handlin' of that stuff hoist your granda out of Donegal in the old days." "Oh, bother," he says. "How am I to say I ain't, when himself has said I am? 'Twould be the marching order I should likely get instead. And if you should," I up and said, "aren't there plenty other jobs as good in the long breadth of the land, and you a handy thrifty chap?" "Have done," he says, souring on me, and God forgive him. Well, I knew the reason why he'd stay, eating the very dirt if need be, and she little better than a pagan deity, as you may say. "He had charge of this place, then?" said Carrados, with a patience that Parkinson could not but disapprove of. "Well, go on." "He had indeed, sir, and never a restful moment has he known since. First his bright pretty color goes, and soon his appetite, and he that would eat me out of house and home now, touching no more'n a sup of tay, and fiddling with a little thin piece of currant cake maybe. And all the while he taking great store of the dynamy and that, and would spend long hours polishing and oiling up here alone. Then the sleep forsake him, or it'd be one sweaty terror of the livelong night the way he'd fetch likely a groan in his dreams or a curse at the long, still blackness stretching to the dawn, and me listening at the latch-hole of his door." "What did he dream?" asked Carrados. "We made no talk about it, sir, him being that stubborn. But many's the queer word he's let out in his sleep, the same as if he'd claimed that one was waiting there to fetch him in a cart. But give notice to himself he would not, as I am tellin', use, and the very grip of death closing in upon him plain for ENY to see, until I knew. 'Tis either Jim or that rampageous divil that's somehow destroyin' him up there, and that's the sacred truth itself, God help me." For a full minute the blind man remained silent, prodding the loose earth with his walking stick as he pondered. When he spoke, instead of any of the things that Mrs. Laffey had hoped, or perhaps feared, it was to put an idle question. "Did this part of the ground have any special name?" he asked. "Before this place was built, I mean. They did used to be calling it the Bone Mound, so I've heard," she said, trying to catch his mood with surreptitious glances. "There was a little hump, you'll understand, but they thrudged the top off it, for to make a level space. Yes, of course they would. And now, Mrs. Laffey, you'd better go on home again. Show this man the way to the front gate as you go. We'll leave that way, Parkinson, but don't come back to me for half an hour." "Very good, sir." Parkinson knew of the times when his master would have no human eye upon him as he worked, and he had ceased, if indeed he had ever begun, to feel a trace of curiosity. "'Deed, Anne, I will," said Mrs. Laffey cheerfully. "The gentleman is welcome to me little front room, too, until your honour's ready. And, begging your pardon, sir, you'll overlook to mention what's passed tonight?" "So far as I am concerned, you can set your mind at rest," was his reply. "But you'll have to explain one or two things in the morning, it seems to me." "I dare say you can put a very good face on it somehow." "I might contrive," replied Mrs. Laffey hopefully. Mrs. Laffey did indeed contrive to put a very good face upon it, as Mr. Carrados found when he visited Stack's openly the following day. It was not Mrs. Laffey's fault that she missed seeing them, and doubtless dropping a word of timely preparation, but their own in discovering a wicket gate that saved the bend of the road and brought them upon Mrs. Bycourt, who was exercising a pair of young hounds on the lawn. "If ever there was a good Samaritan this side the Jordan, it's surely you, Mr. Carrados," exclaimed that athletic lady when she had identified her caller. And she felt that she ought to indicate some concession to his infirmity, in spite of or because of, perhaps, he suggested, coming to her rescue. "You got the note anyway?" "Oh, yes. In fact, it was our first intimation that the bird had flown. It really was a great kindness, because my husband fidgets so over little things, and if he had found Cyril gone and no trace of him, heavens knows what. And then this other business coming on the top of it." "You mean the incident down the garden?" asked Carrados tentatively. "Good gracious, yes. I hope there isn't anything else. Not that I mind a bit of a shindy any time, but I have my poor dear's nerves to consider. He is most tremendously indebted to you. It really was sporting in the circumstances. Mrs. Laffey gave us a most glowing account of your exploit." "Oh, did she?" Carrados considered a little. "I rather wondered what she would say." "Well, she said, as near as I can remember, the way the stranger gentleman and he not seeing put the shame of terror into the trapezan, interlopen, blackguards, who would wring the neck of their own father for a minted sixpence, is a walking masterpiece. Only much faster and a great deal more of it. I am dying to hear all the details, but we concluded that you must have heard them down the garden as you came across to leave the note. Of course, you could get no idea of what sort of men they were." "No," admitted Carrados, "I certainly could not. Mrs. Laffey says she arrived on the scene too late to be any use at all. Sometimes, do you know, I've been a wee bit skeptical of Mrs. Laffey's romances, but in this case she is singularly modest about her own share in it. What gets me is why anyone should want to destroy our property. Yes, that is the mystery, isn't it? Of course we have enemies here and there, I know. It seems strange that anyone who behaves in a perfectly simple, straightforward way, just saying exactly what you think of people, should be received with enmity, but there it is. We've found where they broke in. It's easy to see that they knew their way about, and they have deliberately trampled on the planted beds. Disgraceful. Yes, but unfortunately there's nothing positively to identify any of them by. Well, you'll come in, Mr. Carrados, and meet my husband? With pleasure. But can you guess what it is that chiefly brought me to Stack's today?" "No." "What?" "Cyril's bedroom." "Oh," pondered Mrs. Bycourt, pausing in their progress. "I wondered what tale Cyril told. You are not going to be angry with him for running away?" "Angry? Good Lord, no! It's the best thing I've known him do yet. I'm delighted to find that he has that much spirit left in him. The fact is, Mr. Carrados, ever since I've been here, I've had to be a bit hard-case towards Cyril, simply to counteract the come to Mammy and let her kiss it better ways his dear Auntie Gertie had got him into. But I forgot. You are Miss Hamilton's friend. All the same, I want to understand just how matters are. Then I'll tell you this. Do you know what was the deciding thing made me marry Mark Bycourt in the end? Yes, Cyril. I'm fond of boys, Mr. Carrados, and I want them to have their chance in life. I have two dear little scrubby ragamuffins of my own. They're called Bob and Jack. Cyril was being brought up on Eric, Misunderstood, and Little Lord Fauntleroy, and Cyril will have more need of red stuffing than most people, because when he is 21, he will come into a great deal too much money. You know that, perhaps? I understood so much from Miss Hamilton. Yes, and I dare say Miss Hamilton indicated that I was capable of dark designs on Cyril's fortune? No? Well, if she had, it wouldn't have been wonderful. The fact is, Mr. Carrados, Gertrude is a misfire. It was the surprise of her life, if I said disappointment, you'd think me catty, when Mark married me, and she didn't set out to be pleasant to the interloper. When I saw that, I certainly laid it on a bit thick for Gertrude's benefit. I'm not really a he-woman or a vamp, Mr. Carrados. I'm watching Cyril very carefully, and, if I may confess it to you, rather affectionately. I hope that in the end I, with the unconscious help of my 2 ragamuffins, may make a man of him. Now we have reached his room. Is there anything particular that you want to see? To see in my own way? Well, pointing. The bed is there. Yes. But how on earth do you know? To make no mystery, by the familiar process of putting 2 and 2 together, and on the wall, quite near to the bedhead, is an electric light plug? Yes, there is. So that Cyril, sleeping dutifully on his right side, as he has been taught to do, will be lying with his face quite near that plug? Within a foot or so, certainly. It seems to be a fad of Miss Hamilton's, sleeping on the right side. I suppose she was taught to as a child. I was too, but I've grown out of it. Now I will look into this fitting, if you don't mind. He put his hand with baffling exactness on the rail of the bed, and drew it from the wall so that he could approach the plug. Approach it so closely indeed that to Mrs. Bycourt's mystified curiosity, his face appeared to touch it. Yes, there it is, he remarked, as one who has brought a delicate experiment to a successful end. But what? Demanded the lady, not unreasonably. Why this hanky-panky, Mr. Carrados? Nothing wrong, is there? Forgive me, I really didn't intend to seem mysterious. There is nothing wrong, and if there had been, we have got to the root of it at last. But there is something very curious, and there is something... I was, in fact, trying to break it to you mildly. Something rather horrible. But, my dear man, people don't break things to me. They throw them at me solid. 'Till be as brutal as you like then. You know that Cyril has been having nightmares lately? Oh yes, that is not unusual for a boy, not at all. Nor is the menace of a man standing by his bedside uncommon. What is significant is that it always takes the form of the plague cart come to fetch him. And what is doubly significant is that your man James Laffey passes through exactly the same experience. Cyril never told me what it was, but we all knew that Jim Laffey was pining for the blue eyes of my housemaid. But what a dreadful dream, and what a strange coincidence. In my experience, replied Carrados, coincidence, as we call it, is often merely a key I find that fits a lock I have. Laffey, spending long hours in the new building there, but not, I ascertain, with the electric light fitted in his cottage. Cyril, sleeping here with his face turned to that wall, but not, I learn, allowed to put his foot inside the dynamo house. What is it, Mrs. Bycourt, this strange coincidence? I don't know, she replied, awed in spite of her lavish spirit. What? I will tell you. Over 2 centuries ago, the plague, the Great Plague of London as some histories call it, came to Erling, brought by a fleeing peddler, and nearly wiped the village out. You have heard, perhaps. No, I don't think so. I don't remember anyway. I find the tradition of it is almost lost here now. There are a few forgotten graves in the churchyard, but after the first weeks the dead were not buried there. It took too long to dig single graves, and soon there was neither parson, clerk, nor sexton to perform the office of the church. So a great pit was dug, well away from the houses of the living, in what was then an open field. But it is no longer that. Oh, exclaimed Mrs. Bycourt, with the nameless horror beginning to take form before her eyes. Do you mean? He nodded assent to the unspoken question. Yes, what was the distant grassland field is now your lower garden. The bone mound marks the hasty burial pit, and right upon it they have built your powerhouse. But how does that? Why does it? She stammered. Who can say? It is easy enough to reply that you have stirred up the buried corruption of that dreadful place. But how is it that there have been awakened again the groans and the fears and the agonies of those heart-rending times? Oh, how horrible, she cried. Is it true? Can it be really true? Is what true? He asked. Do you mean which detail? I don't know, she said. I mean any of it, all of it. It is like a nightmare in itself. It is so loathsome, so incredible. Why should it result in that? That is the really interesting thing about it, he replied. You're interesting, she retorted sharply. This, to me, he admitted mildly. I am merely an investigator, Mrs. Bycourt. Your dynamo, designed to transform mechanical force into electrical energy, has here, in some obscure way, also changed physical effect into psychological experience. I dare say you know that in the house, he indicated the wall plug, the wires are carried through iron piping, and outside the cable is brought underground through drain pipes. The lie being uniformly upwards, a warm room like this would create a slight but continuous current, so that, you see, Cyril has really been breathing direct. Yes, it is rather uncanny, isn't it? Laffy, of course, has been in more direct but shorter contact. Actually, we might have expected them both to contract the plague. There is record of that happening to some men who dug into a similar pit rather more than 100 years after the interment. Instead, they caught the emotions of the victims. It will seem quite simple and obvious someday, but we know so lamentably little of that side of electrical energy yet. Even as it is, I shall have to rewrite my lecture. But Mrs. Bycourt had no interest in his lecture. "Oh, the dreadful, dreadful thing," she moaned. "What should one do? I shall have that horrible place razed to the ground. I can't rest until it's gone. And then I shall have a great fire heaped on the spot and burned for weeks, until every trace of those poor creatures is reduced to decent ashes." "Yes," assented Mr. Carrados. "That does seem to occur to one, does it not?